Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 27 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Melissa Whitecross, coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. All of our shows are recorded and available on YouTube, so if you miss out because your lights go dark, you can always catch up on YouTube later. Tonight, Carina Pienaar returns to the show to share her work on the Southern Bald Ibis. But before we get to that, just a reminder to communicate with us using the chat and Q&A feeds in Zoom or the comment feed on Facebook Live. And Carina will be sure to answer all of your questions at the end of tonight's webinar. We are on all major social media channels, and you can use the hashtag Conservation Conversations to let us know what you think of tonight's show. And a big thanks, as always, for the generous contributions towards our webinars, which help to keep these shows free for all to learn and enjoy. Every little bit helps, and all you have to do is visit the Cricket page or EFT BirdLife South Africa directly using the reference webinars with your name. We'd like to remind everyone about the 2023 Kruger Bird and Wildlife Challenge, which will be taking place from 12 to 19 February 2023. In partnership with Rock Jumper Birding Tours. Funds raised will go towards our white-winged flufftail conservation project. Teams that are made up of South Africans who register before the end of August qualify for a discounted participant rate. All you have to do is visit Rock Jumper's birding website and you can find out more to book your spot today. The International Ornithological Congress is taking place this week. There are loads of interesting talks on offer, and you can still take part in the fun. A huge congratulations to the team who have organized this world-class event. We're starting to prepare for BirdLife South Africa's next major flock event, which will be taking place at the Wilderness Hotel from 24 to 28 May 2023. There will be lots of exciting birding on offer, as well as the biannual Learn About Birds event, which will host a science and layman's lab talk session. BirdLife South Africa's AGM will also be taking place on the Saturday with a luncheon after the meeting. Be sure to visit our website to find out more. And now a word from Tessa and James about a family-friendly slapstick show with the Zap Circus, which will be held on the 27th of August at the Zap Dome in Cape Town. Tickets will be sold on Cricket, with the proceeds being split between the Zap and Mouse Free Marion project. Over to the two of them.
Hi, I'm Tessa.
And I'm James.
As most of you know, the introduced mice on Marion Island have devastated the albatross and bird populations there. I remember sitting on the MSC orchestra on the flock to Marion after Peter Harrison talked about the albatross and wanted to help save these majestic birds. And then opportunity arose in Zap Circus School.
Zap is a social circus where everybody looks out for each other while learning circus skills. We are hosting Zap's newest show, Slapstick, on the 27th of August. It is a show for all ages and includes juggling, clowning, acrobatics, and much, much more. If you want to support Zap Circus and Mouse Free Marion, please come to this show. That's at 4 p.m. on the 27th of August at the Zap Dome behind the Artscape Theatre in Cape Town.
Bookings are on Cricket. Search Mouse Free Marion. We hope to see you there.
A big thank you to the two of them, and we wish them all the best with that fantastic fundraiser. But finally, on to tonight's main event. I'm excited to welcome Carina Pienaar back to Conservation Conversations to share her research and conservation work on the endemic Southern Bald Ibis. Carina provides scientific input and coordination of ecological monitoring and research at the Ngula Nature Reserve and surrounding grassland conservation sites. This includes providing post-declaration support to the protected areas within the Eastern Free State grasslands, which include the Ngula Nature Reserve, Upper Wilge Protected Environment, and Snowberg Protected Environment. Carina also researches and monitors the endemic grassland species, such as the Southern Bald Ibis, trying to advance our understanding of the population through coordinating the National Volunteer Breeding Monitoring Program. Carina was recently recognized as one of the Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans for her conservation work in our grasslands. We are so looking forward to hearing what you have to say tonight, Carina. Thanks so much for joining the show, and I'm going to hand over to you to share your screen with us.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Sorry, I was a little muted there. Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to sharing our work in the for the Southern Bald Ibis with all of you tonight. It may not be one of the most attractive birds of our grasslands in some people's eyes, but it's so iconic that you can ask any non-birder in the grasslands whether they've seen it, and the chances are very good that they know it well. I will be talking tonight to you about the Southern Bald Ibis, touching on a brief history of the species, its habitat needs, threats, and population status, as well as touching on the work that we are doing with the species. So first up, the Southern Bald Ibis falls within the family Threschkiornithidae, with all others spoonbills and ibises. Although they are closely related, having long, flexible necks and long bills for foraging in water or spearing prey, their most striking difference is in the bill shape and feeding mechanism. Ibises have a thin, curved bill used to probe in the mud, while spoonbills have straight bills that are broad at the end, used to move from side to side in the water to catch its prey. Both of them feed on crustaceans, snails, fish, insects, amphibians, reptiles, and even small mammals and carrion, and usually roosts on trees or on cliffs that are near and often overhanging water. Worldwide, there are 27 species of ibises found in anything from semi-arid deserts, rocky areas, grasslands, wetlands, and even forests. Of the 27, 18 are not threatened and 9 are considered threatened, one of which is very rare, namely the spot-breasted ibis, found in the forests and swamps of tropical Africa. The major threat to all the threatened ibises are habitat loss and destruction, human disturbance, and indiscriminate persecution. Narrowing it down to our star tonight, the Southern Bald Ibis has the scientific name Geronticus calvus, meaning bald old man. It's one of 2 species in their genus, and the other one is the Northern Bald Ibis, Geronticus eremita, meaning hermited old man. Poor guys didn't get the best names in the world, if you directly translate it. But the Northern Bald Ibis occurs in North Africa and the Middle East and breeds specifically in Morocco and Syria. There's actually no confusing the Southern Bald Ibis with its northern counterparts, and I think personally we got the prettier one of the 2. Comparing it with our other ibises in South Africa, its bright red crash helmet in adulthood really distinguishes it from all our other species. However, as a juvenile or immature bird, or in flight, there's a slight risk of confusing it with the overall duller grey hadida. A hadida, however, has a much shorter and less decurved bill and rounder wings in flight. As you can see right there, it's a little more round compared to the straight wing of the bald ibis. And although the basal part of the upper mandible in the hadida can be red, it will never be completely fully red, as you can see is the case in juvenile Southern Bald Ibises. And a bald ibis will always have, even though it's a grey head, the head will always look a little more bald than that of a hadida. Comparing it to a glossy ibis is a slightly bigger and has a much longer bill and that distinguishable rusty colored neck. Southern Bald Ibis used to occur over most of the eastern side of the country in the early days after its discovery, extending its distribution from about 1,000 kilometers south of its current range and well into the Eastern Cape Province. One of the early Southern Bald Ibis conservationists, W.R. Siegfried, wrote in his assessment of the species in 1971 that bald ibis once ranged extensively throughout the Southern Cape province, occurring as far west as the Atlantic coast and breeding in several localities in the Eastern Cape province at the turn of the 18th century. But as we all know well, they don't occur as extensively in this region anymore, and especially not on the West Coast. This might have been in a time when the grasslands stretched further into the now fynbos biome, and as the vegetation changed, the birds moved gradually away. We now only know of a few breeding sites left in the Eastern Cape, and their core range has now become the Eastern Free State, Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, as well as Lesotho, slightly extending into Limpopo. So on the map on the right side, you can see that's the current extent confirmed by the Southern African Bird Atlas project. Those are all confirmed presence points for the Southern Bald Ibis. Earlier this year, I worked with Dr. Alan Lee, BirdLife South Africa's Science and Innovation Program Manager, to re-look at the population status and distribution of the baldies using a citizen science approach. We firstly looked at the data from the Southern African Bird Atlas project, or SABAP 1 and 2, and compared the reporting rates from SABAP 1 data obtained from 1987 to 1991 with SABAP 2 data obtained from 2007 up until now. As you can see on this map here, some areas showed an increased reporting rate visible in blue, while others has a decreased reporting rate in red. The results are pretty mixed, and we are not seeing that the birds seem to be moving in any specific direction, for example, more eastward or more southward or anything like that. It does, however, seem that like the northern population in Limpopo is struggling a little bit. And I'm guessing that this may be due to trees encroaching in the grassland, which is a major threat to the species. This comparison, however, does suggest that bald ibis was reported in more pentads in SABAP 2 than in SABAP 1. So if we look at the second map, it shows a comparison between the early days of SABAP 2, that is 2007 to 2014, to the late SABAP 2, 2015 to now. Again, there are some changes visible, most notably the seeming increase in reporting rate around the southeastern coast. But at this stage, there's no significant change in reporting rates. On this map, you can see the SABAP 2 pentads. For those of you who are not familiar with SABAP 2 pentads, the whole of the country was divided into 5-minute by 5-minute squares, and that is called pentad. So you can see the SABAP 2 pentads throughout their range that were surveyed in blue and pink, and green shows the pentads that were not surveyed at all. So looking at the pink pentads, it specifically shows where there has been atlasing done, but no bald ibis has been reported yet, compared to the blue where the baldies has been reported. So we have a major gap in our data in all of these green areas that has not been surveyed at all. Therefore, we don't know what birds, including the bald ibis, occur there. Most of the unsurveyed pentads are in and around Lesotho, but there are some pentads amongst the pink and blue, as you can see right about there and on the edges, that should be more accessible for atlases to go and look at. So coming back to the pink, I forgot to say that it may be that the pentads has been surveyed only a couple of times, and that unfortunately the population of Southern Bald Ibis is just too low so that they haven't been seen there, but that they do occur in those pentads specifically. So going on to the population status, they are currently regarded as being vulnerable. So before 1960, very little was known about the bald ibis in general, and the bird was regarded as being rare and uncommon in South Africa, but fairly common in certain areas of Lesotho. Based on his research into the species at their breeding colonies, Siegfried estimated that the total population in 1971 was about 2,000 breeding adults. When D.E. Manry conducted an intensive survey of bald ibis nests in the Transvaal region, followed by multiplying the total number of breeding sites found by the average number of nests per site estimated for each province, which at the time was 15 nests per colony, his estimation in 1985 increased to 3,440 breeding birds in South Africa. And if he included an estimated population for Lesotho and Eswatini, that number increased even more to 4,600. Jump forward to the most recent assessment done by Robin Cullen in 2020, and the number of breeding adults seemed to fall slightly. Robin's estimate followed a series of breeding colony counts conducted at the historical and currently known breeding sites by BirdLife South Africa's Southern Bald Ibis project manager at the time, Kate Henderson, between 2007 and 2013. Shown on the pair of maps on the left. Okay, so first up, those are the known breeding colonies. So if you look at this map, you can see the contraction of breeding range. The larger area is where they were known to breed historically, and the smaller area is where they are currently known to breed. On the maps on the right, you can see how the overall feeding range is projected to change based on climate change predictions in the future. Red, the red areas, indicates a range contraction, and the small blue areas indicates a range expansion. So Robin Cullen used these counts combined with historical and current distributions, this kind of predictive modeling, and the future climate change impacts to estimate that the global current breeding population is between 2,870 and 3,715 adults. So it's a very rough estimate. But if you include the juveniles as well, the total population is estimated to be a maximum of 7,430 birds. In the assessment done by Dr. Alan Lee and myself earlier this year, we looked at not only colony counts, but bird lasser points submitted through the threatened species cause as well, where users allow us to get access to their sightings and are encouraged to enter the number of birds seen as well, and enter whether this number is exact or estimated. Using that data, we were able to look at where the groups were seen and how large these groups were. As you can see, larger dots, it's not very visible, but larger dots are larger groups, and where they are reported most. You can see the importance of this Eastern Free State escarpment, Northern Natal and Mpumalanga regions. Data shown on this map represent only the time period 2018 to early 2022. The average group size were a mere 7 to 8 birds, which is significantly smaller than the large groups that were reported earlier in Sabbath. The largest group, however, reported was 153 birds big. There was also a seasonal pattern reported to the group size, with lower values for nesting seasons when breeding birds were at the colonies, and the highest number biggest group sizes for earlier months of the year, post-breeding, when juveniles join these large flocks. When we used our central breeding colony database to, we then used the central breeding database that we have to indicate whether or not a pentad has a known roost or colony present. We added the group size data from this to the map with the known breeding or roosting sites, and then found that there's a large, the BirdLife data has a large proportion of pentads where they are reported that do not contain roosts or breeding sites across the year. So pink is your breeding, blue non-breeding, and basically what this bar chart shows is that a large proportion of the population is not present at the roosts or breeding colonies to be counted during the breeding season when previous counts occurred. So as previous population sizes were estimated based on colony counts alone, we suggest that maybe the actual population may be a little bit larger than previously estimated. So moving on to the feeding habitat and habitat requirements, as well as the threats. Southern Bald Ibis prefers high rainfall, sour and alpine grasslands, characterized by an absence of trees and short, dense grass. They often feed on recently burned grassland when available, or unburned grasslands, cultivated pastures and harvested croplands. And in all of these areas, they mainly feed on insects and other terrestrial invertebrates. Meaning that well-managed farmland, where all of this dense grassland, shortly grazed with the presence of insects, is very important. So based on their specific habitat requirements and sightings records, BirdLife's Science and Innovation team was able to develop this fine-scale habitat suitability model for the bald ibis. And as you can see, the eastern escarpment, once again, in Mpumalanga and the Free State, going into Lesotho and KwaZulu-Natal, and slightly into the northern Eastern Cape, is absolutely crucial for the survival of the species. Following an initial tracking study to determine the habitat use of Southern Bald Ibis post-fledging, Robin Culane developed this graph, showing the importance of both grasslands in the little more grayish lines. You can see that one going there, and agricultural fields. So both of these are equally important during different times of the year. As soon as the grassland condition starts going down in autumn, you can see the need increase for croplands. This is also the harvesting time, so your croplands have a lot of activity. A lot of farmers have livestock on these crops after harvesting, etc. And as soon as that starts going down, the first rainfall in September and October comes and the green grass comes out again, big blocks or camps are being burnt out in the grassland, you can see the need increase for grassland again. So there's this short period in December, November, December, when the planted crops will be short on the croplands or on the agricultural fields. And during that time, you'll see about an equal use of both habitats as it's available, pretty much. It's very important, though, that this data was only compiled, or this graph was only compiled using 2 birds. And we are currently continuing with this investigation using a tracking study to determine further fine-scale habitat use information, as well as juvenile survival rates and threats that we may not even be aware of. So our current tracking study, thus far, we have deployed 4 tracking units in the Eastern Free State, 2 of which was at the Ngula Nature Reserve, which is about there. You can see that patch of pink, and 2 more from Pretorius Kloof in Bethlehem. So we used Ornatella tracking devices that looks about like that, weighing 20 grams, and fit them on as a backpack on the back of the chicks just before they fledge off the nest. From Ngula, the 2 juveniles, the first one moved to the north, following along the escarpment mostly, and ended up in the Snewberg protected environment north of Meermel. That individual was named Kojak, and unfortunately, we lost him after 7 months. Causes unknown. The other bird moved south slightly and settled for almost a year just south of Ngula, where it hung around, and it's just recently moved into the Spioenkop Dam and Nature Reserve region. That specific individual is named Colonel Sanders, and yeah, he's still doing very well. The 2 juveniles from Bethlehem, named Portos and Aramis, remained in and around the town, feeding in the open fields and wetlands on the outskirts of town. And unfortunately, we received a little bit of bad news today when we found out that we've lost Portos, unfortunately, 8 months after deploying his tracking device. Mostly, we suspect, due to human disturbance-related threats. Based on the fact that in our small sample of 6 birds that we've tracked up until now, including Robin's previously tracked birds, we have lost 3 in a relatively short period of time. We have an estimated juvenile survival rate within the first year of about 50%, which is quite shocking. It just goes to show that there's a massive threat on these Southern Bald Ibises. But as I said, this is a small sample, so hopefully the situation changes as we continue to track these individuals. So also based on the tracking data we received, we can measure the distances traveled per month by these juveniles. This information, as well as comparing the differences traveled between seasons, are useful to tell us what size habitat is required by an individual bird for survival, and how to structure or measure out buffer zones against unfavorable developments in their core region and specifically surrounding breeding colonies. So on these graphs, I show the results from the 2 birds that survived more than a year so far and how they've traveled per season. On the left is Anvil, tracked by Robin Cullen in 2014 to 2016, and how he moved throughout the months. And on the right, we have Colonel Sanders, tracked in 2021 until now. So you can see the importance of, or they move a lot more during the summer months compared to winter, when they have a lot of croplands and a lot of food readily available. It's not necessary for them to travel that far. And it pretty much the 2 birds are very comparable. In Colonel Sanders, you see an initial spike in the distance traveled when he was still investigating potential territories that he can move into. And then once he settled, the distances fell quite significantly, only picking up again in summer. So yeah, that's the seasonal comparison. So in general, what we've also found from this data is that based on our preliminary results, dispersal from the natal colony is usually roughly around 50 kilometers far. But once they find a new territory and they start foraging there, they usually remain within a 15 to 30 kilometer radius. Okay, so breeding habitat. Southern Bald Ibis requires safe, undisturbed cliffs, usually close to or overhanging a water source. So on these photos, you can't see here, but there's actually a waterfall going right through here with a stream through that forest. There's a river flowing right there. And on this colony, there's quite a substantial wetland and pan not far from there. The cliffs can either be sandstone or basalt, and they will use both ledges or pothole structures, depending on its availability. Robin Culain found in his assessment earlier of the breeding colony success that the habitat surrounding the colonies with stable or growing populations constituted significant proportions of grassland habitat. That is intact grassland, or more than 50% intact grassland surrounding the breeding colony. So although they can use commercial agricultural fields, and that it's actually important during certain seasons, if they don't have contiguous sections of suitable grassland habitat surrounding the colony, the chances for them to fail is a little bit higher, quite significantly higher. This requirement of substantial intact grassland leads to one of the major threats to the species, as well as other ibises, as I've mentioned before, and that is habitat loss and destruction. The grasslands in South Africa is known as one of our economical hubs, being crucial for agriculture, both livestock and cropping, mining, and other developments. If done correctly, both livestock and crop agriculture provides important habitat, as I've mentioned, to a lot of our birds, but increased changing land use from intact grassland to crops or having trees encroach into the grassland surrounding breeding colonies can lead to these colonies being abandoned or becoming extinct. As shown in the previous habitat use graph before, bald ibis uses mostly grasslands during the spring and summer months when they are feeding and having to find food a long way from the breeding colony if there are no natural grasslands surrounding the cliffs. This can lead to an increased energy requirement, which won't make it worth the travels. Furthermore, since bald ibis favors high rainfall regions, the constructions of dams pose another threat to the habitat, both for feeding and for breeding, as the cliffs can be, where they breed can become inundated underwater. Although very little can be done to recreate new feeding grounds if that intact grassland has been lost, we now know that artificial breeding cliffs is a new possibility. And that brings us to the Ingula Nature Reserve. When the Ingula Pump Storage Scheme on the escarpment between the Eastern Free State and KwaZulu-Natal near Van Renen was planned, Eskom and the Ingula Partnership realized that an existing Southern Bald Ibis breeding colony would be inundated by the construction of the Bedford Dam. Eskom decided to take action and became the Southern Bald Ibis species champion that funded the Southern Bald Ibis project manager position at BirdLife. And they worked hard toward designing and constructing the first ever Southern Bald Ibis artificial breeding colony. The design attempted to replicate the pothole nesting structures often found in the sandstone cliffs, as you can see there at the top. The Southern Bald Ibis continued breeding at their natural colony as long as they could throughout the construction period, and then gradually started relocating in 2015 when their existing nests started flooding. In 2016, they fully relocated successfully and fledged 4 chicks consistently over 3 consecutive seasons. This was already a major celebration for the Ingula Partnership. But a little point was that the birds were using the more naturally blasted ledges underneath the actual constructed potholes. This is a little bit of a problem since the full dam capacity, 100% capacity, is at that line, and that posed a risk of the nests being washed off or flooded. In 2020, the artificial nest site reached its next major success when 9 nests were recorded, 3 of which was in the pothole structures themselves, and 13 chicks successfully fledged. That means that they achieved 150% fledging rate for a species that usually has a 70% fledging rate per breeding event. This was further celebrated as being more fledglings that successfully left the area than were ever recorded at the original natural colony. So this was a massive win for Eskom and the Ngula project. Building on this success, BirdLife was approached by the Lesotho Highlands Development Authority in 2021 to collaborate on their project and construct project to construct a new dam in the Mogoklong region. The name Mogoklong refers to the abundant presence of the Southern Bald Ibis, and the proposed dam will inundate several bald ibis and black stork breeding sites. One of these bald ibis colonies that will be inundated has more than 50 nests. Their aim, or the LHDA's aim, is to learn from the Bedford artificial breeding site on Ngula, and with our help, construct several artificial breeding colonies to accommodate their birds in the future. They further plan to fit some tracking devices on some of the individuals from the colonies that will be inundated to see what the impacts will be of the construction process and whether they will relocate to new or unknown breeding or roosting colonies that can be monitored with the current monitoring program to keep track of their breeding or their populations in Lesotho. We are very privileged to work with the LHDA on this project, and we believe that through this partnership, we can continue to make a difference for the species survival. So Southern Bald Ibis breed between the end of August, they will start soon, with breeding activity peaking in October and November, and then the juveniles usually start fledging from early December, late November, as you can see on this specific graph, looking only at the yellow. This specific study that I'm showing right now was done by Robin Klein and myself based on breeding monitoring that was conducted at Ngula between 2014 and 2019. And it shows the management and climatic factors playing a role in the commencement of breeding activity. The study shows that breeding starts as soon as your total rainfall or your number of rainfall events and the mean maximum temperature start to increase. So spring, pretty much. While breeding will stop as soon as your grass, which is represented by the NDVI or normalized difference vegetation index, once that becomes too high, meaning the grass is too tall, the breeding will be finished or it will stop completely. We suspected or expected fire to have a significant influence, the presence of fire or burnt areas, and it did not actually in this study have a significant impact on the breeding events of bald ibis. And that's probably due to most of the burning being completed by the time that they start birding or breeding, sorry. Since agriculture, as you can see throughout my whole presentation, since agriculture plays such an important role through grazing and fire in conserving the Southern Bald Ibis, feeding and breeding habitat, we are working with several landowners in the Eastern Free State and Mpumalanga to raise awareness and formally protect the grassland through biodiversity stewardship. Currently in the Eastern Free State, we have declared more than 50,000 hectares of grassland as nature reserves and protected environments, specifically to conserve the habitat for our threatened endemics and threatened grassland birds, such as Southern Bald Ibis, secretary bird, and yellow-breasted pipit. We support the landowners who willingly sign up to this protected environment continuously and advise them on sustainable land management practices to prevent them from overgrazing and misuse of fire, because we need both fire and grazing in conservation for grasslands. It's important to have the right management practices, as over or underuse of either of these two tools can have detrimental impacts on the biodiversity found there. We fully believe, and I fully believe, that achieving land management to promote not only ecosystem health and healthy biodiversity, but also remain profitable for the farmers are definitely possible. And that's something that I'm specifically working towards in my work. So what can you do to help? BirdLife South Africa is embarking on the development of a new red data book and reassessing the threat statuses of our birds. To make sure that we are accurate in our population estimates, we need your help with providing information. The first and easiest way to do this is to join our BirdLife threatened species cause and provide us with exact counts of the threatened birds you see. The second way is to join our atlasing community and continue to and contribute to the Southern African Bird Atlas project, so that we are sure about the distributions and population numbers and how many birds are actually occur there. Sorry, there's something wrong here. I had a little bit of a technical glitch. We specifically need to know about the presence and absence of species within their broader distribution, as a lot of the distribution maps that you can see in your bird books, etc., is just an outline of where the birds could occur. But actually knowing in which areas they are present or absent, as you can see on this distribution, for example, is just as important. If you want more information on the bird SABAP2 or on the Southern African Bird Atlas project, there are actually several introduction videos available on YouTube. So you can just type in SABAP2 in the YouTube search bar and several videos will pop up. The third way you can become involved in specifically the Southern Bald Ibis project is to provide us with breeding or roosting colony data. We need to know if you find a breeding or roosting colony, where it is, so the GPS coordinates, and if possible, how many birds are using the site. So if you can see birds currently roosting or breeding there, just do a quick count, let us know. You can send me an email. If you are aware of any historic breeding at a colony, so you know an area very well, you know they used to breed there, but they are not there anymore, we urgently need to know that. For our population estimates, we need to know whether the colonies are being used, whether they have been abandoned or gone extinct, because that will definitely influence how we do our population assessments. And if you have a breeding colony nearby, if you live close to one or visit a site that often has a breeding colony, or visit a site often, then it would be great if you are willing to monitor the colony annually for the breeding population there. Monitoring entails visiting the colony once or twice if possible during the breeding season, which is from September to December. and filling in a very simple one-paged monitoring form. It's not very clear on this slide, but it's really a very simple form. You basically only need your binoculars or a spotting scope if you can't get close to the colony, a GPS, which you probably have on your phone, and a pen with the form to fill it in. Obviously, photos of the colony is always appreciated because we hope to continue with this project for quite some time and keep accurate tabs on what's happening at these colonies. And you never know who may be taking over from your colony if for some reason you have to stop. So finally, instead of me telling you why you should become involved in monitoring Southern Bald Ibises, I've copied a quote here from one of our loyal volunteer pairs into this slide. Martin and Melanie Potgieter voluntarily monitor the colonies in the Bethlehem, Clarence, Paulroo and Vryburg region, and they sent me this reasons as to why they enjoy being part of the project. So if you can, please read through this, but I'm going to go through it very, very briefly. So since starting to monitor their colonies, they have found many other breeding birds on cliff lines because they are suddenly looking at cliffs and looking for whitewash. So some of the birds that they found in breeding include Lanner falcon, Verreaux's eagle, spotted eagle owls, and a very successful black stork pair as well. They are now also enjoying atlasing for Sabab2 even more because they are seeing more birds and are therefore contributing quality bird presence data to the project. Very importantly to us as well is that because they are now looking to get access to farms to get to these colonies, they are engaging with landowners, they are raising awareness of Southern Bald Ibis, its conservation and its need for proper habitat. And lastly, they're also seeing some very interesting interactions between birds that they would not normally have seen. For example, that they've seen several adults working together to fend off an African harrier hawk trying to feed a chick. So these are just some of the things that you can possibly see depending on where you are and what you can expect when you join our project. So with that, I am finished, and I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all the contributors to this project. I would not be able to present this without the assistance of all these parties, funders, and most importantly, my volunteer monitors, which I won't go through the list and mention all by name, but you know who you are. Please know that your contribution to the conservation of Southern Bald Ibises do not go unnoticed. I appreciate every monitoring form, every point logged on BirdLife as part of the threatened species cause to those of you who don't live in the range and often visit an area, or not even often, just whenever you visit an area with Southern Bald Ibis, that point on the threatened species cause is absolutely crucial. And I do appreciate all of your personal time and effort that you do put into monitoring our birds across the grasslands. Thank you all so much.
Carina, well done. That was outstanding. And I know you were under some pressure to put that talk together. So thank you very much for doing such a fantastic job. And I see lots of applause and reactions coming through via the Zoom room. So I think that the audience really did enjoy that. Well done. Yet another talk just emphasizing the extreme importance of citizen science and seeing what people can do to help our incredible conservation work in their own capacities as citizen scientists. So thank you so much, Carina, and a big thank you to everyone out there who is a citizen scientist. Carina, I see I'm having some technical glitches here. My computer's acting up. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, super. Well, I'm not sure if you can see me, but my screen is frozen a little bit. I saw we got one question in just before my Zoom decided to freeze while it sorts itself in Ngula partnership. And we always appreciate the incredible support that we've received from the Ngula partnership and our colleagues at Eskom. I think Ngula really has been one of the flagship conservation projects for grassland conservation in the country, and your work and certainly your predecessors and the likes of Robin Klein and David Mapisa has really showcased what a fantastic grassland conservation project this has been, of afforestation and the pressures that planting trees in what were formerly grasslands can bring to the biome. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that for me, please?
Sure. So for our project specifically in this core of the range, we are starting a project, or hopefully starting a project soon, that will work with Working for Water to clear out the encroachment of trees, such as wattle trees, into our grasslands. Obviously, we don't want the trees to come into the grassland. Grasslands can actually capture more carbon in areas where they actually occur, like in our grassland areas. The grasses can capture more carbon than trees could in this area. The wetlands and the grasslands here are so much more important. I'm not saying anything that we shouldn't be reforesting existing rainforests or previous rainforests. That is definitely very important, but trees do not belong in grasslands. It's a very direct threat to our biodiversity, and the grasses and the wetlands can actually do so much more in capturing carbon than the trees would be able to do so. So I'm hoping to start a bigger project on clearing trees from the grassland to make sure that we remain, what's the word I'm looking for? Remain true to its natural state. So yeah, that is pretty much what I'm hoping to start doing very soon.
Fantastic.
Hope that
Yeah,
answers your question, Tish.
Yeah, I think that's such a crucial part of that post-declaration support that you're playing in that landscape, Carina. As you said, over 50,000 hectares of grassland has been declared, but putting a stamp on it as a nature reserve or a protected environment is just the first step in a very long process that is keeping those systems healthy and ensuring that we protect those vital ecosystem services. And as you said, clearing out those alien invasive plant species like your black wattle and various others that choke up our water sources, and much of these grasslands being those strategic water source areas, is such an important thing to be done. And yeah, we're wishing you everything of the best as you get that project up and running, and we're really excited to see where it goes. And yeah, Kish, just to get a little bit more onto your afforestation in these areas that are already transformed. Currently, we're obviously targeting the more natural grassland areas and trying to restore those. I wouldn't say that we've dabbled too much in the areas that have already been transformed, but I think you've given us a new idea to look at for some grassland expansion work, which would be so vital for securing these wide-ranging species like our bald ibis and our secretary birds. Carina, a slightly more light-hearted question from our eagle-eyed Eleanor Mary. She's asking why the bald head, for example, no feathers. Does this assist them with their feeding process, or is there any other reason for that shiny red head?
So that is a very good question, Eleanor. Thank you for that. I don't think it specifically assists them with the feeding process, as they only mainly use their bill for probing insects out of the grassland. But I do know that a lot of the time it does aid them in, especially red, aids in a lot of mating strategies for birds. The red shows that they are able, the brighter the red, the more able they are to find food, healthy food, and therefore they are a more attractable mate. So whether this is actually the case with bald ibis, I'm not completely sure. And I don't know if, Melissa, you've read up about or accidentally read something about why they've got that red head. But if I use other strategies found in birds specifically, that would be my educated guess, but it is just a guess. Unfortunately, I can't give you a clear answer on that one.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm a bit stumped here too, but I know things like your hornbills and your guinea fowls with those extra casques and things on their heads, that's often linked to your thermoregulatory processes and being able to keep cool under hot conditions or warm in the cold conditions. And we know these birds can certainly experience some severely cold conditions. I'm sure as a resident of the high altitude grasslands yourself, Carina, you can attest to just how chilly it can get in those grasslands. But you made a comment from Martin and Milani, and I must just say, Martin and Milani are probably two of our most exemplary citizen scientists. And I have to say a personal thank you from my side too, because they work with the secretary birds this past season, which has been showcased in our African BirdLife magazine, is just phenomenal. And how awesome to get high definition camera crews out to document what's going on with these wonderful grassland birds. So a massive thank you to the two of them from me as well, and giving our grasslands an international audience. But they made the comment of, once you start looking at cliffs as a birder and you start watching for that whitewash, you will never look at a rocky structure the same way again. And I think it was such a standout moment for me, because when I had my first Tiger Falcon survey and we went out and started staring at cliffs, I've never looked at them the same way again. And as you say, the more time you spend looking at cliffs, you start seeing the falcons, the vultures, the storks, all these incredible birds that use these vertical behemoths as their home. And Carina, I'm sure it's been the same for you with all of your monitoring work.
Very much, yes. So it's been absolutely fantastic seeing all the birds on that make use of the cliffs and the air currents that are associated with these cliffs. So it's not just your big stuff, but I've had such an amazing time watching the swifts going in and out of cliffs while monitoring bald ibis, and it's such special things to see. It's not just your normal, oh, there's a swift, and identifying the swift. You can actually see how they go into their nests and how they literally never stop flying. It's quite amazing. And yet they don't fly into the cliffs, which is in itself a very, very good thing.
Absolutely. No, it's incredible sitting up there and watching these birds come past at eye level, the birds we only ever see high up in the sky. But
for sure.
Yeah, Carina, I'm not seeing too many other questions at the moment. I'm just going to check. Yeah, nothing more on Facebook. But I have to just say that was outstanding. I really am just so impressed with what you managed to do tonight. And as I said, I know how much pressure you were under to do this evening. And all I can say is a massive, massive well done. And thank you to you for your incredible effort this evening. It really was a phenomenal showcase of the Southern Bald Ibis and the incredible work that you're doing. So huge thank you to you for that. And I wish you all the best with the rest of the project. And before we let everybody go, next week, Andy Wassung will be back with amusing anecdotes from across Africa, a very entertaining talk on some birding tales and funny stories shared between him and some of his colleagues from the virtual African Bird Fair this year. So do tune in. I guarantee you will have a giggle, and we'll certainly look forward to seeing Andy share that with all of us. But Carina, before I let you go, any last sentiments this evening?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's really been actually quite fun, apart from the pressure. It's been quite fun to present this to all of you tonight, and thank you all so much for staying and for listening to me. And I hope lots of you are very interested in joining the Southern Bald Ibis project soon.
Absolutely, and they can just drop you an email. Is that right, Carina? You can just give them
For
your
sure.
email.
Yes, so you can just send me an email to carina.pienaar@birdlife.org.za. I will put that in the chat box as well.
Thank you, Carina, and we absolutely look forward to many more citizen scientists joining that army of cliff-staring humans who go out there and tell us what's going on with our breeding birds. All right, everybody, it's a wrap for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and a big thank you, Carina, for all of your hard work. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, same time, same place. Keep your eyes on the skies, keep enjoying those birds, and we will see you next week. Good night, everyone.